And James Antle, he is joining us from the Washington Examiner with the very latest. James, thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Good to be here.
Okay, I want to start with the rally last night, and we heard some of Rick's reporting there, but I want to play a quick soundbite from Kellyanne Conway. She was on the Sunday morning political shows, and I want to get your opinion. Take a listen.
But when he talks about the hoax, he's talking about this fantasy, this unproven fantasy that somehow the campaign that I successfully managed for the successful part of the campaign was in cahoots with Russians. The president has every right to wonder why, where there seems to have been nefarious activity, folks don't want to investigate. They don't want to investigate the loser.
Pivoting there. We're really seeing a lot of pivoting. And this is obviously a hot topic this week, too, because we saw the joint press conference. What are you hearing from the White House? Is there a consensus, and is there a cohesiveness when it comes to the messaging?
Well, there's been a little bit of goalpost shifting, I think, we've seen this week, particularly from President Trump's personal legal team. But I think the White House messaging has been fairly consistent. They are trying to make a distinction between Russian interference in the 2016 presidential election, which they're conceding did happen, and they're agreeing with the assessments of the intelligence community that it happened, and the concept of collusion, the concept that President Trump or people from his campaign or people with his knowledge within his orbit were somehow involved in the interference, that they were collaborating with the Russians.
When we talk about the Russian hoax, and it's not necessarily the investigation, I kind of heard that pivot from Kellyanne Conway in a different soundbite where she said basically it was that a vote was not changed because of the Russian interference. And that's the distinction that we're seeing this week?
That's a distinction. I think the president's problem with the whole Russia narrative is he views it as something that delegitimizes his win, that detracts from the victory that he had. And so he always wants to sort of push back against that. And I think he thinks that even the Robert Mueller investigation casts a cloud over his presidency and administration.
A perfect segue. I mean, whether or not it wraps up next week or next month or sometime in November, there's a lot going on in November.
Absolutely. I mean, the simple fact is they're going to still be having to try to combat forms of Russian meddling in this year's elections. You're going to have all of Congress up for grabs, a third of the Senate, all the House. The House is very much in play, which is why the president was in Ohio to try to prevent another demoralizing special election loss for Republicans. So they've got a lot on their plate.
You talked about the president out on the campaign trail. Another perfect segue for me. We just heard him tweet out, and this wasn't very long ago. He tweets in part, "Tariffs are working big time. Every country on earth wants to take wealth out of the U.S., always to our detriment. I say as they come, tax them. If they don't want to be taxed, let them make or build the product in the U.S. In either event, it means jobs and great wealth." The reason I wanted to read this tweet in particular is because we're seeing the president go out on the campaign trail. We suspect he's going to be on the campaign trail quite a bit. Every once in a while, he goes off on a tangent and he starts talking about Russian meddling.
Yes.
When should he be talking about tariffs? Is there an effort to talk more about why are these tariffs in place? Why is the tax breaks? Why are those good? Just really touting economic news.
Right. I mean, the concern among a lot of Republicans is that in addition to the president tending to go off message at times, that the tariffs are something that will detract from the economic boom that's going on. Some of which, I think they like a lot of his policies with the tax cut, with deregulation. The fear is that particularly in the farm states, many of whom are people who voted for Trump and would vote Republican in this election, that they're going to be hit hard both by the tariffs themselves and the retaliation from China. And so I think the president is trying to calm people down, get them to stay the course at least through this election, and make the argument that his tariffs will pay off in the long term.
What are your predictions? I mean, you've been covering the White House for some time. I'm curious as to what we're going to see over the next couple months, because there's a lot that could take place. This Mueller investigation could wrap up. And then also we could see something like the Manafort trial come to an end. And whether or not that directly impacts the campaign, it's still going to be fodder.
Absolutely. The fact that you have your former campaign chairman is incarcerated, is on trial. A lot of evidence was presented against him. Some people even have the theory that this will somehow have a collusion angle when they say, well, why did he take an unpaid job in the Trump campaign when he had so many financial problems? So I think whatever Robert Mueller decides to do, does he decide to try to wrap this up and have some kind of report around Labor Day so it's not too close to the election? It will still influence the election no matter what. There's going to be a lot of people talking about it very close to when all the votes are cast.
A lot of people talking about it, and certainly job security for you. So we hope to have you back because it's not going to be a dull moment. James Antle, thank you so much for joining us, sir.
Thanks
Appreciate
for having
it.
me.